So, Angela, somebody comes to you that you're working with one-on-one, and they report a super high stress load. They're a hard charger, high performer, but they know that stress is a major component that is holding back their level of performance. Let's start with this concept of sleep. When you are assessing sleep, are you looking at things like sleep architecture in their aura ring, or do you start somewhere else? Like, how do you assess the impact that stress is having on sleep? And then what are some practical tools that you might implement for somebody to help improve either stress resiliency so that it helps with sleep, or improve sleep so that it helps with stress resiliency, kind of like that bidirectional two-way road?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I really like to look at actually is their aura data. And so if they don't have it already, I find that somehow looking at aura, for me, I guess I've looked at it more, I find easier to dive into the data and understand it better than something like the Whoop. I can work with it, but I just find from sleep architecture and recovery point of view, and the reason I like it so much is you can gain really valuable insights. So for example, if I see that their HRV is tanked at the early part of the night and it's gone below the line that Aura's saying, and then it's rebounding back up, I know that actually they are just overstretching during that day. But by 2, 3 a.m., they are beginning to recover. And we might still see semi-decent levels of deep sleep and REM sleep. What I commonly see in people that are highly stressed is that their cortisol's high, and so they're overshooting. Like, they go into deep sleep and they might fall asleep, but as they're coming up, they don't come out and have some REM sleep and then go back down like they should do. And then obviously in the second part of the night, there should be more REM sleep. What happens is they almost like overshoot and come out, and then they wake up. And then they're going to struggle to go back to sleep. And sometimes those are micro wake ups that they're not really aware of. And sometimes they're more profound and they feel like they were awake all night. And so it helps me to understand, because then we can look at it and go, right, where is this stress coming from? Is it poor blood sugar control? Is it that you've got food intolerances? Is it that you could even have some parasites, right, that are keeping you up? But what's going on in your day that's framing the night in that way? Are you really bad, like in terms of you sit and watch Netflix or drink copious amounts of wine to unwind in the evening, and they've got loads of blue light coming at you, and that's affecting your sleep architecture? Or is it that you're eating something that's causing that irritation? So it's really helpful. And as you gather that data, and you can look at like 3-4 weeks, and I can see their breathing rate. That's the other thing I like to look at, because if their breathing rate's high, you know that this person's really under stress, unless they're getting sick. And often I'll see people, their breathing rate is 16.5, 17.5. So it's like, okay, how can we physically get you to get that down to closer to sort of 12, right? Or even that might seem too much at first. But then I say to them, let's begin to do some breath work during the day so you become conscious of it. And I know 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. If you think you're only going to get 4 breaths a minute, that's really hard for someone who's highly stressed to do, because they'll hold their breath and they're like, and they just want to take another deep breath in. So even doing like the 2x breath, first of all, where they're in for 2, out for 2, and they slowly elongate that in for 3, out for 3, and for 4, out for 4 over a series of breaths, they're starting to slow it down. And then they drop their shoulders and they start to realize, because half the time when someone's so stressed, they haven't really connected with what it feels like to feel relaxed. They've lost touch with that. So you've almost got to show them what it feels like so they can begin to connect with that energy. And also they have to realize it takes minutes, because these people don't have time to spend a long time doing things. Like, they can't necessarily go and do a full-on Wim Hof session where they're lying on the floor and getting high on their own supply. It needs to be physically in the moment. This is what I'm going to do. And then they see it track on the data. And really, like, I found 4-7-8 breathing, when you can get there, moves your HRV quite significantly. Even things like reading fiction at night changes. Some people, and I was really guilty of this, because I love what I do so much, always reading health and performance related stuff in bed. And then I switch to fiction and my HRV comes up, So it's little hacks and changes.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because there are two things that I used to be really bad at. One would be, yes, reading like health, wellness, and fitness, either articles, this could be journal articles, or just like text of, people that are putting out books right before bed or in bed. Or the other one I would argue was way worse was reading like New York Times or Wall Street Journal or some other type of news outlet. And I think that was way worse. And I noticed that when I moved away from that, so I actually moved away less from reading in bed and only like reserving bed for like sleep and sex. That's like it. And that's kind of like the goal is sleep and sex. And the only thing that I can do otherwise is like breath work. So I will do some of that without even any prompts, unless I'm doing like maybe a pacer. And I've noticed that a couple things: increased HRV overnight, increasing HRV faster within the sleep stages at night, but then also to a lower respiratory rate, which is what you were referring to, which is pretty incredible. I think some people just go to bed with way too much of an amped up nervous system, and they'll see like they're like, why was my heart rate so high, my HRV so low for like the first like hour, 2 hours of the night, and then it finally lowered. That's a natural phase that we're going to see people, but you don't see typically like this stark, like crazy drop in heart rate. Like you want your heart rate to be pretty low prior to going to bed. And one of the things that I love doing is, number one, not exercising too close to bed, because that used to kill me. I used to exercise way too late. But the other thing is like just engaging in some simple breath work where we pace our breathing, do some breath holds, which can be highly important to help increase CO2 tolerance and reduce overall blockage of the parasympathetic nervous system or vagal output. It's just super helpful. So I'm glad to hear that that's like a really good tool or tactic that you use. Do the people that you work with, do they buy into that stuff, or do you have to do some like slight nudging or convincing, just because it sounds kind of easy, and maybe for some people it sounds a little bit woo woo? I mean, it's become a lot more commonplace now, but is that something that takes a little bit of buy-in, like engaging in breath work?
It can do until they see, like, as long as they're, I think as long as you get the buy-in for them to buy
Mm-hmm.
devices to track, as soon as they see data, then there's no arguing it, right? So it's like,
Yep.
okay, fine, yeah, I can see, okay, my breathing rate 16 and a half. They didn't even know what that meant before. So now it's like,
Yeah.
well, what should it be? Oh, well, and then because these individuals are competitive, so it's like they're competitive with themselves.
Right.
So it's like, hang on a minute, are you saying my breathing's no good? So then, of course, they'll be like, well, how can I improve that? And if there's a physical exercise
Mm-hmm.
that's small, that's going to move the needle on that, then they will. But they are results oriented. I think that's the thing. And I think, the
Yeah.
other thing I find is not eating before bed. It's almost better, I've found, to go to bed a
Huge.
tiny bit hungry
Oh yeah.
than
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and your breathing rate and everything goes down. But with women,